二個質素就係嗰個清晰度啦，係個清晰度。
So when we begin to identify in our own mind experientially awareness and clarity, then if we choose, we can meditate on our mind, the deeper level of our mind.
咁即係如果當我哋能夠即係可以去到一個喺我哋心識嘅層面，可以有一個嘅清晰度同埋有嗰個嘅純粹嘅覺知嘅時候咧，我哋可以運用呢樣嘢嚟到去幫助我哋做一個嘅靜心。
The other main type of meditation is analytical meditation. Analytical.
第二種嘅靜心咧係一個分析性嘅一個靜心嚟嘅。
And in that kind of meditation, we actually think.
而喺呢一種靜心裏邊咧，我哋係會去諗嘢嘅。
At least at first.
最低限度開始嘅時候。
Examples come from what we call the Lam Rim, which means that's Tibetan for the graduated path to enlightenment.
咁啦 ，Rim 係一個即係佢哋西藏嘅一個嘅詞彙啦嚇，就係話我哋點樣去到得道嘅時候嗰個嘅一個旅程嚟嘅。
So all the different kind of stepping stones on the path to enlightenment. So suffering, impermanence, compassion, love, wisdom. All these could be topics for your analytical meditation.
咁所以就話佢喺呢個過程啦，喺我得道過程裏邊咧，其實我哋會經歷好多嘢嘅，包括痛苦啦、受苦啦，一啲嘅即係慈悲啦，或者係一啲唔同無常係啦、無常啦，所有愛啊呢啲各樣嘅嘢，其實我哋都係一個過程，好似一個階梯，令到我哋進展去到呢一個所謂得道嘅一個層面。
And what you try to do with this analytical meditation is you take a topic, for example, suffering.
就好似點樣做法咧？就係話，例如我哋用一個嘅題目就係話受苦啦。
Or more commonly, compassion or wisdom.
更加可能比較普通平時會用嘅就係話慈悲心啦。
You learn about this through listening to people talk, reading books. You learn about it, and then in your meditation, you review that.
咁就話可能喺平時你睇咗書啊，或者聽人講過關於慈悲呢樣嘢啦，喺你呢個靜心裏邊咧，你就去思想啦，去諗啦，去諗翻呢樣嘢啦。
And then you try to feel it.
然後你嘗試去感覺佢。
And when you feel it, for example, compassion, when you start to feel even a little bit of the compassion, then you stop the analyzing, stop the thoughts.
因為當你進入去個感覺，當你真係開始感受到少少慈悲嘅時候咧，其實你已經係停止咗嗰個所謂分析嗰個思想啦。
So you go back to the first type of concentration meditation.
咁於是
You just sit there on that feeling of compassion.
咁然後咧，你就翻去第一種我剛剛講嗰種係集中嘅嗰個嘅靜心啦，就去嘗試集中去感覺呢個慈悲嘅感覺。
Then that feeling or that experience, in this case compassion, then it will kind of go away.
咁然後呢個感覺咧，慢慢咧佢又會離開㗎咯喎，呢個慈悲嘅感覺。
And then you go back to the thinking, try to refresh it.
然後你翻去嗰個想嗰度諗嗰度啦，就係話你又去分析翻，又去諗翻，咦慈悲係咩咧
So you go back and forth.
咁於是喺呢一個嘅靜心裏邊咧，你就會係不斷咁樣去諗啦，然後去感覺啦，然後去集中啦，又再翻去諗啦，咁樣。
Then when we become more advanced, we'll be able to do both. They'll kind of merge analytical and concentration.
咁而當我哋更加即係進階到高級少少嘅時候，你就會發覺你能夠用為一體啦，將兩樣嘢，即係剛剛嗰個集中嗰個注意力同埋呢一個嘅分析可以融為一體。
Now some of you may have the feeling, wow, this is too much for me. I can't do this.
咁有啲人可能講就哇好難喎，啲太難咁多嘢嘅，好難做喎。
Don't worry.
冇擔心。
Anybody here finish high school? Raise your hand.
邊個讀中學畢業㗎啦已經
Anybody finish high school? Good. Anybody finish college?
邊個讀完大學啦
Okay. When you were tiny and you looked at, finishing high school, it looked like, oh, I can never do this.
當細個嘅時候，你諗我要讀完中學死啦，我讀唔到咁難嘅。
So you go into kindergarten.
咁咧去幼稚園。
First grade, second grade, third grade.
係啦，一級㗎嘛幼稚園。
And then most of us finish.
大部分人都可以讀完㗎。
Yeah. And then you go to college, you say, oh, I could never get a PhD or a BA.
咁然後你就去大學啦，你就同自己講哇，我永遠都攞唔到呢個學位㗎啦。
You enroll in your classes, you write your essays, you take your exams, And slowly, stepwise, you get there.
咁然後慢慢一步一步，你又考試啊，又讀書啊，又考試啊咁樣，其實你一步步就去到嗰個位㗎啦。
Training your mind or meditation is the same thing.
咁訓練我哋嘅心識同埋即係呢一個所謂靜心，其實都係一樣嘅啫。
And all of us after lunch, we're going to join kindergarten.
我哋要由呢個幼稚園開始啊。
And some of you will skip grades.
有啲咧就會跳班啦，
But there's no competition.
但係冇比賽嘅呢
There's
度，
no rush.
亦都唔需要急。
Okay? But we'll start. We'll get the starting point. Some of you already have it.
我哋會有啲人其實已經有呢一個開始嘅，
So we'll do that together. We'll start together, or we'll be wherever we are. We'll do it together.
我哋會一齊做嘅，我哋一齊。
Okay. So the next section is going into the mind,
咁下一部分咧係關於我哋嘅心識啦，講到。
and I think it's 10 to 1. I'm going to stop talking here,
好啦，而家我諗喺呢度我就停止啦。
and maybe you have a few questions, and then we'll go eat.
咁然後你哋會唔會仲有啲問題想問嘅？咁我哋就可以去食啦。
Right, iPhone.
有問題？
Yes, please.
I have a comment.
Yes. Yes.
It's so nice to come somewhere like this where there is a lot of laughter.
Mm.
People think, and I respect that sometimes, that meditation becomes a serious issue. But there's time for laughter too.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
咁佢講就話佢唔係話有咩問題想問，佢只係有一個即係意見，佢就覺得平時即係嚟到可能講靜心啊呢個比較嚴肅嘅題目啦嚇，咁但係今日佢發覺都有好多嘅笑聲，佢話覺得非常之好啊，有咁樣嘅情況，即係雖然講一個好靜心嘅題目，但係亦都可以有好多好輕鬆嘅一個即係笑聲出現。
We tend to be high strung.
我哋成日都嘗試即係好努力去做一啲嘢出嚟嚇。
Anybody high strung? Some of you, not all of you. You tend to be high strung, kind of inside a little bit tight.
成日裏面都好似好緊啊，好拉得好緊啊咁樣。
So humor helps to kind of relax and let some of that go.
即係幽默感其實好好嘅，幫助我哋放鬆咗自己，放低咗一啲。
Sometimes His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, when you come to my teachings, I want you to think you're coming to a picnic.
有時候啦，後話咧，即係嚟到佢嘅即係靜心裏邊咧，其實就好似幻想下我哋去郊外野餐咁樣嘅。
Now, he doesn't want you to go play baseball or be on a barbecue.
佢咪要你真係去打壘球啊，或者即係去招嘢食下，唔係
He
咁。
wants you to be alert to the teachings,
咁佢想你即係對於佢教嘅嘢咧，係有一個即係醒覺喺度嘅。
but relax
但
like a
係
picnic.
相同地，亦都係需要有一個放鬆，好似去郊外咁樣放鬆。
So I think humor is helpful to get us a little bit more in that state. Of course, it's not always 100% to help us.
咁而音樂感其實可以幫助我哋做到呢樣嘢，係啦。多謝晒。
Yes, please. Yes.
Can't you make your friends or your family member away from selfish?
Yeah, good, very good.
點樣可以令到我哋嘅屋企人啦，或者我哋朋友咧係離開，唔好做一啲自私嘅嘢咧？
I think the first thing is we have to respect everybody.
首先第一樣嘢咧，我哋需要尊重其他人嘅。
So if we feel that we're better than somebody else, a family member or a friend, because we're less selfish and they're more selfish, that doesn't work.
咁如果所以第一樣嘢就係我哋如果覺得自己係比佢哋好啲啊，我冇佢哋咁自私喎，咁其實咁係冇用㗎。
On this, I like teaching by example.
咁而呢樣嘢我覺得好緊要就係我哋自己要做一個嘅即係例子嚇，作為一個例子。
So as we work on ourselves and become less selfish and more loving and compassionate, others around us, they'll notice it.
咁如果我哋自己能夠喺自己開工做好自己，就係話自己變得比較冇咁自私啦，更加有愛心啦嘅時候咧，其他人係會留意到嘅。
They may say, "What happened to you? You gone crazy?"
咁然後佢哋就問我：你做咩？你係咪黐咗線啊？
And or they may say, "What are you doing? How are you? This is a nice change in you. How did you do it?"
咁又可能佢哋會問：咦點解咧？你有咁嘅改變，咦幾好啊！你改變，你點解會咁改變啊？
So when they're ready
而當佢哋準備好嘅時候，
and they're asking,
而佢哋又問你嘅時候咧，
that's the best situation.
呢個就係最好嘅情況啦，
It doesn't always happen.
唔係經常咁樣發生嘅喎。
So we have to learn skill
咁你學習一啲嘅方法，
How can we help them without making the situation worse?
就係唔好令到個情況更加壞，但係同時間又幫到佢哋嘅。
You know, you're so selfish. Why don't you act your age?
點解你咁自私㗎？你都唔係好似你咁嘅年紀，應該做啲乜嘢？哇！於是佢就爆炸，
That doesn't work.
咁就唔得㗎啦，冇用㗎啦。
So we have to have skill.
我哋需要有啲方法嘅。
And I think one of the best ways is through modeling, doing it ourselves.
最好嘅方法就係用自己嚟做一個模範咯，一個典範啦。
Or sometimes we can ask someone in a very nice, respectful way, are they interested in learning some of the stuff that we've learned that has helped us?
咁有時候或者我哋可以用一個好有禮貌嘅、好尊重嘅方法去問對方，就話：咦，我學咗啲嘢喎，都幾有用對我嚟講，你會唔會有興趣知道啊？
Sometimes they're not ready for it.
有時佢哋未必準備好嘅，
So they say, get out of here.
佢就係你咪搞我啦你。
But if they say that, you know they've heard it.
但係你知道咗咧，係你會聽到你呢樣嘢啦。
So when it's a little more comfortable for them later, they may then ask you more.
咁可能到遲呢一個時間咧，佢哋覺得更加有自信嘅時候，佢哋可能會走嚟問你嘅。
Yeah, so there's not an easy way. I think we need respect. We need real, compassion for everyone. And with that attitude, then it's easier to kind of, help people when they're ready slowly to open up to these things without kind of pushing.
咁所以好緊要嘅就係我哋其實最緊要尊重其他人啦，唔好去嘗試去強迫佢哋做任何嘢啦。當我哋能夠咁做嘅時候，會更加容易。
Ready for lunch?
喺邊度食飯？
Okay. It's almost 1, but luckily, please.
所以大家等陣準備去食午餐咯。咁啊，希望大家把自己啲嘢全部收晒嚇。我哋中間時間會清場嘅，因為下午做嗰啲頭會做嘅嚇。所以如果有啲人上晝離開啦，呢度有個 donation box， 大家唔記得嚇，大家要記得嚇。OK， 表達我哋對呢個 Dr. Barry 嘅正義。所以我哋2點鐘準時翻嚟，而家係1點鐘。而家係1點鐘，2點鐘準時開場。OK， 多謝大家，而家大家多謝Dr. Barry。
到呢邊個 echo 好大啊！呢邊個 echo 好大。
而家好啲未啊？而家聲音得唔得？而家聽到聲音得唔得
？OK 啊。
OK 好。咁啊，而家我哋準備開始今日下午個課程。而家最熱烈嘅掌聲，歡迎Dr. Barry。
So, shall we start?
Yes.
Thank you. We had a good morning.
我哋有一個非常之好嘅早上。
let's begin
我哋而家開始啦噃，
where we left off.
我哋睇下邊度係完結嘅，我而家再重新嚟
And
講。
where did we leave off?
點解我哋邊度完結啊？
Meditation, thanks.
係啦，就係講靜心。
So we'll continue with meditation.
咁我哋繼續講靜心啦噃。
And I thought since we just ate, we just had lunch, it's not the best time to meditate.
啱食完晏晝咧，就唔係一個好嘅時間去做靜心啦。
Usually when your belly is full, all the blood, or not all, much of the blood in your body goes to your stomach and your intestines, and it deprives your brain.
因為咧，當我哋啱食完飯嘅時候，所有嘅血液咧，大部分啦嚇嘅血液咧，就會去到我哋呢個消化系統嗰度嚇，咁所以咧就即係冇乜可以去到腦袋嗰度啦。
That's one of the reasons why lots of people take an afternoon after lunch nap.
就係點解好多人食完飯都會有個小睡咧？就係咁解啦。
So I thought what we would do is divide this afternoon into 2 or 3 sessions. I'll see how you're doing. If people are getting really tired or something, we'll take a break. People can get up, move around, and refresh. If not, then we'll wait and divide the session into 2, roughly an hour and a half for each session. So we'll decide as we go along. And I thought after this first session, when we come back, then we would meditate. I think we'll be a little fresher at that point.
咁我哋咧晏晝咧大概會分做成為2個部分啦。咁然後咧喺第一個部分完成咗之後咧，咁可能我哋有一個小休啦。然後翻嚟嘅時候咧，我哋又可以大家一齊做下靜心。咁嗰個時間應該會好啲啦，我哋唔會咁眼瞓啦。
We live in a technical computer age.
而家喺呢一個即係科技嘅時代啊，
So we have to develop patience and compassion towards the computers.
需要呢個就係正正我哋需要有慈悲嚇心嘅時候，有耐性嘅時候。
So I've pretty much said everything for now that I want to say about meditation. And now we're going to move on to the mind.
咁咧，我對於靜心咧，其實我要講嘅嘢咧都差唔多啦。咁而家我會嘗試去講關於我哋嘅心識。
So, you know, the Buddhist understanding of mind
佛陀對於呢個心識嘅理解咧
is very broad.
係好廣泛
We
嘅。
mentioned that briefly earlier.
我哋早前都有提過少少。
When we talked about Kokoro and Ishiki, you know, the different Japanese terms, and the translators pointing to the brain, I'm pointing to the heart, you know, everybody's a little confused.
就係話，即係我哋之前有講到啦，有講關於翻譯啊，嗰個詞彙點樣去翻譯啊，咁啊，我指住個頭，佢又指住個心，咁大家真係好混亂，唔知道大家講啲乜嘢。
But basically, when I refer to mind, we use that synonymous, the same as consciousness, to mean the same.
咁其實個心識咧，其實我哋講嘅意思咧係代表即係同意識其實係即係相同嘅嚇，即係心識其實等於個意識。
And it's all inclusive. So it includes the thinking, the feeling, the emotions, the intuition, and a lot of other stuff that we'll talk about. All that is included in mind, the Buddhist understanding of mind.
係啦，即係以佛家我哋所講嘅所謂心識咧，其實包括我哋嘅思想啦、我哋嘅諗法啦、我哋想法、我哋嘅情緒啦、我哋嘅感覺啦，所有呢啲其實都係包括喺我哋呢一個所謂心識裏邊。
So the next thing I'd like to do with you is from the Buddhist literature. Is from the old Buddhist literature from about 2,000 years ago. And it was developed primarily by a great master whose name was Asanga.
OK， 咁大概2000年前咧，就即係有一位嘅即係佛教嘅一位嘅老師啦嚇，咁佢就有一個咁樣嘅解釋嘅，對於呢個所謂心識。
And And it's called Abhidharma. Have you ever heard of the term Abhidharma?
有冇聽過呢個詞彙叫阿 B 達嘛？
Okay, it's old Buddhist stuff, and it's a lot of categories, lists.
咁係一啲好古老嘅一啲即係佛教嘅一啲嘅教導嚟嘅。
So in that are some incredibly deep and helpful ideas and concepts, but it often looks like lists, very boring.
咁裏邊咧其實有好多係關於佛教一啲好古老啦，但係非常之有用嘅一啲嘅概念嚇。咁但係咧係一個成個好長列嘅排列嚟嘅，咁所以望落去可能都比較沉悶一啲。
So what I've tried to do is animate it a little bit, make it a little bit more, user-friendly.
咁我咧就嘗試令到佢咧睇下可唔可以活動少少，令到佢有少少嘅即係動感喺度啊。
I don't expect you to know all this stuff in the next section.
我下一個部分要介紹嘅，我唔會期望你哋會完全會知道佢其實講啲咩。
But I want to give you a flavor.
咁但係希望可以有少少嘅感覺俾到你哋嚇，有少少嘅味道俾到你哋。
Anybody know the Swedish smorgasbord?
有冇人食過呢一個即係瑞士嘅一個即係好似一個嘅頭盤咁樣嘅嚇？
You sample a bunch of stuff.
咁就係裏邊咧個盤裏邊咧有好多唔同嘅食物喺度嘅種類嘅食物。
So we're going to take a little bit of look at some of the concepts about what mind is.
咁我哋會睇下就係話究竟心識呢一個嘅概念係一個咩嚟嘅咧？
And that's a little helpful.
咁呢個會有啲幫助嘅。
And then we're going to do some meditation to try to have a little bit of experience of our own mind.
咁然後我哋會做一個嘅靜心啦，會有一個經驗去體驗下我哋自己嘅心識。
Now, when we talk about mind, what we actually are talking about is a mental continuum.
咁我哋講嘅心識咧，其實係講緊我哋嘅頭腦一個不停喺度發展緊嘅一樣嘢嚟嘅。
Does someone have a mala that can loan me, a rosary, beads?
呢個係一串一啲佛珠啊。
So when I talk about a mental continuum,
當我講呢一個即係頭腦嘅延續嘅時候咧，
I'm talking about a string with beads.
就好似呢一個一串嘅珠咁樣。
Okay, string of beads.
係啦，一串嘅珠啦呢度。
The beads are each moment of mind.
每一粒嘅珠咧就係嗰一下當下嘅嗰個心識。
The string is like the glue
如果呢條線咧就好似嗰個嘅膠水咁樣，
that glues my mind moments one to the next. Not one from me, one from you, one from you, but all my mind moments, moment to moment, are kind of strung together. And that string or that glue we call karma.
咁如果呢條線咧就好似個膠水咧，就係話將我呢一下嘅心識同我下一下嘅心識，就係話我每一個當下嘅心識咧，係將佢連結埋一齊，係講緊我自己，唔係講緊其他人喎，係我自己嘅心識嚟嘅。而呢樣嘢呢一條線咧，我哋亦都會叫佢做因果。
Do you know what karma is?
大家知唔知因果係咩？
Raise your hand if you have some idea what karma is.
知道卡埋即係因果係咩嘅？即係
Okay,
舉
maybe
手。
half of you, very good.
係啦，大
Very
概
good.
半數嘅
Okay,
人
good,
知道
good.
係咩嘅。
Other people don't. Very good,
其
very
他
good.
人知道都非常好。
Excellent. It's a Sanskrit word, karma.
係一個梵文嘅字啦，
And it
因
means
果
action.
係意思係指行動，
So it implies cause and effect.
係講緊有因亦都有果。
Basically, there's two general categories of cause and effect.
其實有兩種嘅種類嘅因果係有，
One is the natural world.
一個係自然世界裏邊啦。
So the water falls off the cliff in a waterfall due to natural forces.
咁一個瀑布咧，你會見到水咧係向下流，其實係一個好自然嘅一個力量喺度流動緊嘅。
We experience due to karma.
我哋嘅經驗亦都係因為我哋嘅因果。
Karma is our past actions.
因果其實講緊就係我哋過去嘅一啲行動。
And they, not 100%, but close to it, they influence our current experience.
唔係100%啦，但係佢會對我哋啲過去嘅行動咧，係會對我而家呢一個經驗咧係有所影響嘅。
So let me give you an example.
我俾一個例子。
Have you ever been walking along and you have a bad thought about somebody else?
有冇試過呢一路行嘅時候，可能心裏邊有一個對人有一個唔係咁好嘅思想，
And immediately you stub your toe. You kind of drag your big toe on the ground and you hurt it.
然後咧好快咧你就發覺，誒自己就整到自己撞到腳趾公喎，係嘛？
Some people have that experience. I have.
試過有咁嘅經驗，我試過啦，我就試過啦。
That's karma.
呢個就係因果啦。
And it's a nice one because you can see the connection. You had this bad thought about somebody and boom, you hurt yourself.
呢個係一個好好嘅例子，好容易明白，好快嘅一個因果就係話，你一有一個壞嘅思想咧，下一刻你自己就經驗到壞嘅一個結果啦。
But what usually happens is our experience is colored or influenced by actions we did not just a moment ago, but a long time ago.
咁但係好多時我哋經驗到嘅就係咩咧？唔係話啱啱剛過嗰一刻諗嘅嘢影響到呢一刻，而係可能之前好耐做過一啲某啲嘅行動，而影響到呢一刻當下嘅經驗。
So as light workers, we're trying to be better people, happier people.
作為光嘅行者咧，其實我哋想成為一個更加好嘅人啦。
It's very important to do good things now,
係好重要就喺當下要做好事，
non-harmful things.
係唔損害他人嘅事。
Because it'll ripen in the next moment, in the next year, maybe the next lifetime, in good, wholesome experience.
因為呢一啲嘅因咧，就會喺下一刻啦，或者下一年啦，甚至下一個世啦，會影響到可能你就會結出一啲唔同嘅果出嚟啦。
And the opposite is true. Opposite.
相反亦都係嘅。
If we do nasty, harmful things now,
如果我哋喺呢一刻做一啲壞嘅事嘅話咧，
we're going to have lots of troubles.
咁我哋就會有好多嘅麻煩啦。
It's the natural law of karma.
呢個係因果嘅自然嘅一個定律嚟嘅。
It's called the natural law because this is just the way things are.
呢個叫自然定律，因為就係事情就係咁樣會發生。
Okay, yeah, good. So the glue that kind of connects the different mind moments for each of us is karmas, our previous actions.
咁所以就係話，我哋每一刻嘅思想，每一刻所諗嘅一啲嘅嘢咧嘅心識咧嘅意思咧，就會係連埋晒一齊，就成為我哋所謂嘅嗰個叫因果啦。
And a simple way to say that, we have an English phrase, I'm not sure if it's in Chinese, what goes around comes around.
咁就係即係喺英文嗰度咧，我哋有句咁樣嘅説話啦，但係個意思咧就係話，即係你種乜嘢嘅因就得乜嘢嘅果，種乜嘢因得乜嘢。
That's karma.
呢個就係因果啦。Now I know， 種瓜得瓜，種豆得豆 ，right？ Yes。Oh, my Chinese is improving. Thank you. Thank you.
I never know that I helped somebody improve their Chinese. Of course, I wasn't the only one. It was a group effort. So that's an important thing to understand about the mind, that moment to moment it's changing. And what we're really talking about is this continuum, like the beads on the string, okay, of mind moments. My own, your own, everyone's own.
咁所以我講咧嘅所謂呢個因果咧，其實係一個每一下每一個當下咧，其實都係會改變緊嘅，就係視乎我哋每一刻我哋所做嘅行為係啲乜嘢嘢，我哋自己嘅嗰個行為。
Some people believe there's this super consciousness and we all are part of it.
咁有啲人相信咧，會有一個係好大、好強嘅超強嘅一個意識嘅存在，而我哋係呢個超強意識嘅一個部分。
And some of you believe that.
有啲你哋係會相信嘅。
That's not a Buddhist understanding of mind or consciousness.
呢個對於佛教嚟講咧，我哋唔係有咁樣嘅理解，我哋嘅理解係唔同。
That's more in the Hindu tradition, the Christian tradition, probably Islamic tradition.
呢個係比較係即係係其他宗教，例如即係基督教啊，或者係一啲印度教啊，佢哋嘅想法係咁樣樣，佢哋嘅認同。
So the Buddhists, we don't believe in a creator God.
作為佛教徒咧，我哋係唔相信有一個創造者嘅。
So you ready to kick me out of here?
你係咪打算要將我踢出去咧？
I'm just joking. No, of course not. But what we do believe is this incredible potential that everybody has inside.
但係我哋相信嘅就係我哋有一個好強大嘅潛質係喺我哋裏邊內在嘅。
It's a potential to become completely enlightened, become a Buddha. We all have that.
我哋每個都有一個咁強大嘅潛質，就係成為一個得道嘅一個嘅，好似佛陀咁樣。
All living beings.
所有存在嘅個體。
Even at night when you're laying there trying to sleep and you hear this buzz, 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 buzz.
就算夜晚即係你瞓喺度好靜嘅時候，你聽到嗰隻即係蚊喺你隔離喺度嘈嘅時候，
The mosquito.
嗰隻蚊咯就。
So we don't kill the mosquito.
所以我哋唔會殺，我唔會殺生，所以連一隻
And
蚊
in,
都唔會殺。
and in fact, sometimes you'll see people when there's like after a rain, there's a bunch of these little worms or different little wet kind of animals that come out. They'll go and they'll gently pick them up and take them off the road so that people or cars won't run over them.
咁所以有時你會見到我哋會做嘅就係，譬如我哋即係落完雨啦，見到可能地下有啲嘅積水，積水裏面可能有啲嘅生物嘅存在啦嚇，咁我哋會即係將佢兜起佢，然後將佢擺埋喺一邊，令到啲人行到嘅時候唔會將佢踩死。
So, freedom from suffering comes from knowing the subtle nature of our mind.
我哋點樣能夠從呢一個痛苦裏邊可以得到自由咧？就係通過我哋認識到我哋呢個好我哋心識嘅好微細嘅嗰個本質。
So let's talk a little bit about kind of how we categorize mind in general, and then we'll go to the more subtle aspect of mind. Okay?
咁我哋先講講就話大概我哋心識其實有邊啲嘅部分，咁然後我哋再去到一啲比較微細嘅層面。
So this is the general category of mind, and it's broken into two different parts. One are primary minds and one are secondary minds.
咁呢個心識我哋就話主要係分成兩大個部分嘅，一個係主要嘅心識嘅部分，一個係次要嘅心識部分。
And as I've written here, there are 6 primary minds and 51 secondary minds.
咁喺呢度寫咗啦，就係話有6個係主要嘅心識部分，同埋51個係次要嘅心識部分。
Now, a lot of these 51 secondary minds are a little bit like feelings or emotions.
咁而呢51個次要嘅部分咧，其實好多時係我哋嘅情緒啦嗰方面嘅。
So here are the 6 primary minds. The first 5 of them are related to our senses, our seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and tactile or touching.
咁呢6個嘅主要嘅心識嘅部分咧，頭嗰5個咧，其實大家睇到咧就係我哋嗰5個嘅感官嚟嘅，即係話我哋眼見到啦、聽到啦、聞到啦、味覺感覺到啦，同埋身體觸摸嘅時候感覺到。
So for example, if you look at the screen, look at the slide.
咁好似我哋而家望到個熒光幕啦。
Actually, that's not the best example. If you look
呢個唔係
at
最好嘅例子。
yeah, it'll be clear in a moment.
Okay.
If you look at the face of this Buddha.
好啦，而家我哋睇睇呢一個即係圖畫嚇，呢個佛祖嘅圖畫。
The first moment you look, all you do is see.
咁第一下我哋望到嘅時候咧，我哋就係睇到嘅啫，即係我眼嘅視覺上見到。
And then pretty quickly, your thinking mind kicks in.
咁又好快咧，我哋嗰個思想嗰個層面咧就會開動咯喎，就會開始諗啦。
You start thinking, oh, is that the Buddha? Oh, maybe that's the Buddha.
你開始諗啦，咦呢個係唔係我哋嘅佛陀咧？可能係噃。
And then you may think, oh, it's such a peaceful face.
咁然後你又會諗啦，呢個係一個好平靜、好和平嘅一個面孔喎。
So that's the 6th primary mind we call mental consciousness. And on the gross level, that's thinking.
咁所以呢一個咧第6個嘅層面咧，就係話嗰個所謂思想個層面咧，就係我哋會諗嘢嘅，係我哋思想去諗一啲嘢。
So a child does this a lot better, these the 5 sensory primary minds. The child is much better at staying in that mind.
咁而對細路仔嚟講咧，頭嗰5個嘅主要嘅心識咧，嗰個係更加強烈啲，係更加容易啲留喺嗰個部喺維持喺個狀態嘅。
We tend to jump quickly into the thinking mental consciousness.
而我哋作為大人咧，好容易咧，其實我哋就會跳咗去嗰個所謂諗嘢思想個層面比較多啦。
So the child goes somewhere and the child goes.
咁個小朋友去到個地方咧，佢就會即刻係即係哇咁樣。
Can you see?
咁樣都佢個表演，佢望下佢睇啦，佢表情就係咁啊！呢個就係小朋友嘅表情嚟嘅，去到個地方 ，OK。
They're totally absorbed in what they're seeing.
佢哋完全係喺佢哋個五官見到嗰啲感官嗰度咧，係完全喺個狀態裏邊。
So they're staying in this primary visual mind.
佢好容易留喺嗰個即係所謂視覺見到嗰個感官上邊嘅。
Now, this mental consciousness or mental mind, if you will, has different levels of gross and subtle.
咁呢一個呢個思想嘅心識嗰個層面咧，即係諗嘢嗰個層面啦嚇，其實都有兩個層次嘅。
So here we have mental consciousness, and we've divided it into three: gross, subtle, and most subtle.
咁呢個思想嗰個嘅意識嘅層面咧，其實我哋都會就係擺佢有三個唔同嘅部分啦。一個就係即係主要大腦啲嘅，一個就係微細啲嘅，再嚟嗰個就係仲更加微細啲嘅。
So the gross mental consciousness is the thinking, conceptual mind.
咁第一個主要嘅大嗰個部分咧，就係我哋嗰個所謂概念嗰個嘅分析啦，嗰個嘅思想。
And we all know that all too well. We
咁
know
我
that
哋
very
好
well.
多都認識呢個層面嘅，我哋呢個部分。
Sometimes that thinking mind won't shut up.
有時呢一個思想呢個層面咧，就係唔會熄機嘅，
It just keeps running and running.
就不斷咁樣諗嘢，
Chaos,
有好多嘅混亂喺當中，
crazy,
有好多瘋狂嘅思想啦，
hellish.
好似好地獄嘅
Some
感
of the
覺。
words that you all used when we were describing some experience of looking in.
有好多字
Your
你哋
words.
你哋曾經用過嘅就係話，當你去形容內觀嘅時候，睇自己嘅時候嗰啲嘅字眼。
So sometimes the thinking mind is extremely valuable to help us make important decisions, etc. But sometimes it gets us into trouble.
咁好多時咧，其實我哋呢個所謂思想嘅心識咧係好有用嘅，咁但係同時間咧，有時都令我哋係進入一啲即係好大嘅煩惱裏邊。
And it gets us into trouble when it's out of control.
咁主要當我哋即係點解會進入啲煩惱，就係因為佢係完全不受控制嘅。
Then there's the subtle mind,
然後就有呢一個係比較微細嘅心識啦。
and this is a whole group of different kind of minds.
呢個又係另外一組係完全唔同嘅心識嚟嘅。
So for example, this includes intuition.
呢個亦都係包括我哋嘅所謂第六感，我哋嘅直覺力。
Raise your hand if you sometimes have intuition.
你舉手，如果你知道自己有時都有呢個直覺力，
Most of you.
好多人都有，我記得好
Good,
朋
good.
友
So it's international, right?
係國際嘅原來呢個直覺力係。
I know it is. I'm just
係
personal. Because we're all people.
因為大個都係人類，係咪？
And some people have a little more of it, some people less. It changes in our life. Sometimes we have more, sometimes less in our own lifetime.
有時我哋強啲，有時弱啲嚇，有時多啲少啲咁，喺唔同嘅階段，可能個直覺力都會唔同。
Sometimes it's reliable, it's predictable. Whatever our intuition is comes true.
有時我哋直覺係好準確嘅嚇，諗到睇到嘅嘢係。
Sometimes not.
有時可能唔係，
Probably for most of us.
對大部分人嚟講。
When we purify more and go deeper in the practice, our intuition increases and accuracy improves.
當我哋能夠淨化我哋自己嘅心識嘅時候咧，其實我哋呢個所謂直覺力咧，亦都會係增強，亦都會加強咗，亦都會準確咗。
Now there's something called clairvoyance. I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. Yeah. Clairvoyance.
嚇？讀心術哦，讀心術，讀心術，讀心術。
Yeah, I'll explain it. Clairvoyance has 5 different parts.
讀心術有5個唔同嘅層面嘅5個唔同嘅部分。
The first one is to be able to know what's in other people's minds.
第一種就係話我知道對方嘅心識係諗緊啲乜嘢。
The second one is to be able to see very long distance, even many kilometers, clearly.
有啲第二種就係話可以喺好遠距離我都可以睇得好清楚嘅。
The third is to hear from great distances clearly.
有啲就係第三種就係可以聽到好遠嘅，隔咗好遠都聽到嘅。
The other is to know past lives of ourself or other people.
另外一種就係話知道自己嘅過去嘅生命啦，或者係人哋過去來生，即係以前嘅生命。
To know that accurately.
而知道得非常之準確嘅。
That's not easy.
係唔容易嘅。
Many people claim to know their own or other people's past lives, and sometimes not sure.
有啲人話自己係知道啦人哋嘅過去嘅生命係點樣樣，但係係咪真嘅咧都唔好知道。
Other examples of this subtle mind are the dream mind, when we're dreaming.
另外呢一個層次即係微細啲嘅呢一個深色嘅層次咧，就包括我哋嘅夢境啦。
It seems like our senses are active when we're dreaming. It seems like we're seeing and hearing everything.
就好似發夢嘅時候咧，我哋好似真係聽到或者睇到或者感覺到一啲嘢嘅。
But actually our senses when we're asleep, they're not working.
但係我哋嗰5個嘅即係感官咧，其實喺我瞓覺嘅時候，其實係唔係開動緊嘅喎。
So it's probably something to do with memories, probably.
咁可能係同我哋嘅記憶係有關啊。
That's a more subtle mind, dream mind.
我哋嘅發夢呢一個嘅心識咧，係一個比較微弱嘅微細嘅心識嚟嘅。
And then, you know when you sneeze or you yawn?
你知唔知打喊路啊，或者打乞嗤嘅時候啊？
Anybody feel kind of a pleasant feeling when you sneeze or yawn?
當你打喊路或者打乞嗤嘅時候，你會感覺到好舒暢，有個舒服嘅感覺。
Yeah, a lot more of you. Great, great, great. Actually, what's happening when we sneeze or yawn is our mind is becoming very subtle, but it's very quick, and it goes very quickly. So it's often a very short period of time. And if you pay attention, next time you yawn, and next time you sneeze, kind of just check it a little bit, watch it, observe it, you'll probably find some bliss or some joy or some good feeling.
咁就係點解會有咁嘅情況出現咧？就係話當我哋係打喊路啊或者打乞嗤嘅時候咧，其實我哋係進入咗呢個好微細嘅呢個心識嘅層面裏邊。咁所以如果下次我哋再打喊路或者打乞嗤嘅時候咧，我哋可以去內觀去感覺下，你會發覺可能喺嗰一下當下嘅時候咧，你會有一種好舒暢嘅感覺嘅。
It also happens when we die.
亦都係喺我哋死亡嗰刻會發生。
When we die, from a Buddhist perspective, we go through 8 different stages.
咁喺佛家嘅角度咧，我哋覺得死亡其實我哋會經歷8個唔同嘅階段嘅。
And through these stages, the mind becomes more and more subtle.
咁喺呢8個階段咧，每一階段咧，令到我哋嘅心識咧係變得更加嘅微細。
And the 4th stage is when the breathing and the heart stops. So the doctors would say at that point the person is clinically dead.
咁喺第4個階段裏邊，第4個階段咧，其實就係講緊我哋停止呼吸嘅時候啦。咁亦都係喺醫生嘅角度嚟講，喺嗰個階段咧，你就係死亡啦。
From a Buddhist perspective, the person hasn't yet.
咁而喺佛家嘅角度咧，我哋覺得嗰個人其實仲未真正死亡嘅。
From a Buddhist perspective, after the 8 stages are finished, then the subtle mind leaves the body.
咁喺佛家嘅角度就係話，要經歷晒嗰8個階段之後咧，嗰個人嘅所謂微細嘅心識咧，先至係真正離開佢嘅身體嘅。
If we've done a lot of good things in our life, that mind or consciousness will exit through the crown. It'll go up the central channel and exit the crown.
咁就係話，如果我哋喺我哋嘅生命裏邊，我哋係做咗好多好事嘅話咧，喺死亡嘅時候咧，當我哋真係離開嘅時候咧，我哋會通過我哋呢個所謂頂輪，經過我哋身體嘅中軸啦，然後通過頂輪咧係離開呢個身體嘅。
And when the mind exits the body becomes a corpse, and that's the Buddhist understanding of the time of death, and that subtle consciousness leaves the body.
咁而當嗰一下就係話，當我哋呢個所謂微細嘅心識離開我哋身體嗰下咧，先真正即係身體成為嗰個死屍啦。咁我哋佛家先叫呢個為之死亡。
Now, if the consciousness leaves south,
OK。如果我意識係向南行，即係下邊行嘅話啦嚇。
through the lower orifices,
由下邊嗰個地方出嚟嘅話咧，
then usually the rebirth is going to be in the 3 lower realms, more suffering realms.
咁你再投胎翻嚟嘅時候咧，你會係喺比較即係痛要受苦嘅嗰啲嘅情況嗰度投胎啦。
And that's a result of doing, harmful actions, a lot of harmful actions in our life.
呢個就係你如果喺你嘅生活命裏邊做好多即係損害人嘅事情嘅時候咧，你來生就會受呢啲嘅痛苦啦。下三界我唔知係咩。三界 OK， 要下三界嘅，即係如果你做壞事嘅，你就要下三界，即係下三界。即係會做毒物嗰啲啊，即係唔好做壞事，要做毒物。
You know, I don't speak Chinese.
我唔識講中文。
But even though I don't speak Chinese, I have a feeling that the woman that's translating for me is a good translator.
所以我唔識中文，但係我有感覺，我翻譯呢個咧應該翻譯得 OK 嘅。
And I say that because I'm watching your faces, and I see mostly understanding in your faces.
我從你哋嗰啲面部表情可以見到你哋係明白我講咩嘅，咁所以我知道佢應該翻譯都冇問題啦。
Sometimes my words are a little confusing, so you may get a little confused because of that.
咁有時可能我用嘅字咧係比較即係令你哋混亂，所以你哋會比較唔知我講乜嘢。
But also, when some of these difficult terms come up, she doesn't have the arrogance and the pride to say, "Oh, don't tell me, I know best." She's very open and listening to people that have suggestions on how it might be said a little better. To me, this is a sign of a very good translator.
佢話因為咧我即係當我去到啲位，我唔識譯佢嗰啲好專業嗰啲比較佛教嘅字眼嘅時候，我都好願意聽。咦，你哋係點樣譯啊？咁我都願意接受你哋嘅意見，唔會話我識晒啦，唔使話俾我知啦。所以我覺得佢都應該係一個好嘅翻譯員。
So today we're all very lucky.
咁啊，因為大家都好幸運。
Now, there's the most subtle mind.
我哋有一個最微細嘅一個心識。
And that's the mind that kind of manifests very briefly when we sneeze or yawn.
咁呢個就係當我哋即係打喊路或者係打乞嗤嘅時候嗰一下嘅。有人試慣咗啦。
I see, good. I won't embarrass you. Good. It also comes up during sexual experience, this most subtle mind.
咁所以呢個好最微細嘅呢一個嘅心識咧，亦都係當我哋有性行為嘅時候咧會出現嘅。
And the longest that it stays is when we die, this most subtle mind.
咁就喺我死亡嘅時候咧，我哋就會係最長嘅時間停留喺呢一個最微細嘅心識裏邊啦。
And in meditation.
同埋就係喺我哋嘅靜心嘅過程。
So this is a very advanced meditation.
咁呢個係一個好高級嘅一個嘅即係靜心。
But some yogis and yoginis, men and women, will meditate all of their lives on trying to die.
有啲嘅即係練習嘅人咧，佢哋就會即係若通過呢個練習咧，去嘗試去感覺即係死亡係點樣樣嘅。
His Holiness the Dalai Lama says sometimes that he dies 7 times a day.
有時咧佢一日死7次嘅會。
And what I think he means is that he's doing this meditation to go successively deeper and deeper levels of mind until he reaches this most subtle mind, and then rather than die, he comes back.
咁講咧就係話佢唔係真係話佢死，而係問題係佢通過佢嘅靜心咧，佢能夠落到去一個好微細、好微細到嗰個心識嘅層次，於是俾佢感受到嗰樣嘢，但係佢能夠係翻出嚟嘅。
And we do that in tantric meditation.
喺坦吹嘅靜心裏邊。談吹，談吹，佢定係咩談啊？係談定係談？談吹嘅靜心。
Is this partly a Cantonese Mandarin problem or just?
Because she's speaking Mandarin, so that's why I was like,
right.
what is it in Cantonese?
係密宗嘅一種嘅靜心嚟嘅，係密宗嘅一種靜心。
In Japan, they call it Nikyo. Nikyo in
喺
Japanese.
日本叫 Nikyo，
Nikyo.
喺日本啊，
密教，
密教啊，密教同密宗有咩唔同啊？
The word tantra, actually, the longer name is Tantrayana.
Tantrayana 呢個就係佢嘅即係正式嘅名嚇，呢個嘅名。
And yana is kind of translated usually as a vehicle, not your car, but a general term for vehicle, something that can move you from here to there.
OK， 即係佢個翻譯就係講就話呢個好似係一個嘅工具啊，會令到你由一個地方去到第二個地方一個工具嚟嘅。
Now, I don't know about Hong Kong or China, or I don't know, but in the Western countries, some people have kind of called Tantra a sexual practice.
咁我唔知喺香港啦，但係即係好多地方咧，好多人都會叫 tantra 呢樣嘢咧，其實係一個即係性嘅一個嘅練習嚟嘅，叫咩話？雙修啊，雙修。
This is not authentic Tantra, Buddhist Tantra.
呢個唔係真正嘅，即係所謂我哋佛教所講嘅 tantra 唔係咁樣。
So just so that you know that.
所以你知道嚇。
Because, you know, many of the people practicing Tantra are monks and nuns and nuns have a vow of celibacy, no sexual contact.
咁因為即係喺佛教，我哋知道我哋有我哋嘅僧人啦，係咪啊？咁佢哋其實都係即係已經係立誓，佢哋唔會有呢一個即係性嘅生活嚇。咁所以咧變咗即係其實佢哋係唔係做呢樣嘢嘅，唔係你一般所認為 tantra 做嗰樣嘢。
So, in the practice of Tantra, which is a solo activity, not sexual with a partner, okay, it's a solo activity, one meditates and imagines this subtle body.
咁所以 tantra 佢嗰個嘅練習裏邊咧，其實佢係自己一個人做嘅啫。OK，獨自己一個人唔需要有對方啦嚇，自己一個人。然後主要佢就係要進入去一個好微細嗰個嘅身體裏邊。OK。
And the energy and the essence, like the Jing, similar to the Jing essence. Jing.
精啊，係咪講精？
Jing.
哦，
that's
精神
Jing,
體個
Jing.
精，精神體個精。
That's what I was saying. Jing. No, essence.
精係啦。
This is what
精
I was
髓
saying.
係嘛？精髓個精 ，OK， 精髓。
And in this system, that Jing runs inside the channels.
咁喺呢一度咧，就係話，即係佢嗰個精咧，就會喺嗰個軸嗰個中軸嗰度咧，就會流動嘅。
And when we meditate on that, we also develop the corresponding subtle mind.
當我哋能夠通過咁樣嘅靜心嘅方法嘅時候咧，我哋就可以揾到呢一個咁樣嘅好微細、最微細嘅呢一個微細體嘅心識啦。
So we'll come back to this most subtle mind and the subtle body a little bit later.
咁我哋遲啲咧就會再即係花多少時間再講呢個即係最微細體嘅一個部分，我哋會再講遲啲。
And I'll talk a little bit about the death process, because that's where it mostly manifests, other than these very special yogis and yoginis who do it in their meditation.
咁就係話好多時除咗係即係死亡嘅時候，我哋會經歷到呢個最微細嘅呢一個心識之外咧，好多時我哋一啲即係好高級嘅訓練咧，都會幫助我哋進入到嗰個地方嘅。
Okay, this is too much. We won't go into this, okay?
呢個太複雜啦，我哋唔
This
再
is
講
just to give you a slight flavor that these 51 secondary minds have 6 different categories.
咁就話主要俾大家知道就係話喺呢51個次要嘅心識裏邊咧，其實有6大個分別嘅，6大個種類嘅。
This is amazing. The most photographs come at this slide. I'm very happy to see the interest. Amazing.
哇！咁多人中意影呢張相啊！呢張
I thought everyone would kind of go.
以為大家會瞓着覺，以為大家對呢樣嘢最有興趣。
I want to look at the first category called always functioning.
我想睇第一個嘅種類嘅分別嚇，佢就係叫做經常都係運作緊嘅。
So these are the 5 different of the 51 secondary minds. These are the 5 that are always there.
咁
Always
喺
there.
51個嘅所謂次要嘅心識裏邊咧，呢5樣嘢咧，呢5個種類咧係經常喺度運作緊嘅。
intention, you intend to do something.
就係我哋嘅意圖啦，我哋嘅意圖，我哋想做嘅意圖。
And then attention, you attend or pay attention, or you don't.
我哋嘅注意力啦，就係我哋有冇將個注意力擺喺嗰度嗰個地方啦。
Or you heard of, what is it, ADHD? ADHD.
高度活躍症。
ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
過度活躍症，係過度活躍症。
It's in both kids and adults, both.
喺細路仔同大人都有嘅呢啲情
And
況，
it's people that just can't sit still at all.
就係有啲人咧冇辦法可以坐得低嘅，
That's a lack of attention.
就係缺乏咗呢個所謂注意力啦。
And then there's recognition.
呢個就係確認啦，
Now this is a special kind of recognition,
呢個係一種特別嘅確認嚟嘅，
which is where the mind recognizes the object.
就係話嗰個心識係確認到嗰個嘅物件。
All minds, it said, have an object.
每一個心識咧，其實都睇到，即係留意到嗰啲物件嘅。
I see some wonderful faces that are kind of questioning, really?
咁有啲我見到啲面好似有少懷疑下，有時
Wonderful. Because in some practices that we do, they often say objectless
咁有啲
meditation,
練
no
習
object.
喺練習裏邊咧，我哋就話會去練習就係話係冇物件嘅，無物嘅。
Dzogchen, Mahamudra, Zen, Chan, these practices, they tell us there's no object.
不同嘅一啲嘅練習，例如佢禪修咧，其實都係講緊就係話，即係無物嘅喺我哋個練習裏邊。
So probably there is an object, but it's kind of asleep. It's kind of, it's latent, not
So-
manifest.
咁所以講咧就其實唔係話真係無物，只不過嗰個物件可能係即係唔係咁活躍，OK。
And then there's feeling.
然後就係我哋感覺啦，
And this feeling is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, those three choices.
就係三個選擇嘅啫，開心嘅、唔開心嘅，或者係中立嘅。
So for example, your mind engages with an object. Let's say you look at the screen.
咁例如就係話你嘅心識啦，就係睇住一個嘅物件，例如就好似呢一個熒光幕咁，
You're going to have some feeling,
你會有一啲感覺嘅，
like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
可能就係話，咦幾有趣喎，
Or, that's boring.
呢個好悶啊，
Or it's very confusing.
哇呢個非常之混亂啊，
Or kind of neutral. You just
或
kind
者
of
好
look at
中
it,
立，
say, well, I'm going to try to understand this.
可能同自己講，我嘗試去了解下啦。
So there's always a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral reaction when the mind engages an object.
咁所以當我哋心識係注意喺一個嘅物件嘅時候咧，我哋好容易就有一個感覺就係好嘅感覺，開心嘅啦，唔開心嘅啦，或者係中立嘅。
And then this is contact, meaning the contact when the mind and the object make contact.
咁呢個接觸嘅意思就係話，當我哋當下嗰個心識同呢一個物件咧接觸嘅嗰一下。
So right now I'm looking at this gentleman,
咁喺
and
呢
the contact is between my eyes and my mental consciousness, visual consciousness, and this gentleman.
咁好似而家呢一刻咁樣，我嘅眼咧就望緊呢一位嘅先生啦。咁所以我嘅所謂視覺嘅嗰個意識咧，其實就同呢一位先生咧，其實有一個接觸嘅呢一下。
And then there's a feeling,
咁又有個感覺啦，
and the feeling was pleasant.
咁個感覺係好嘅。
Oh, he's taking notes.
啊，佢喺度寫 notes 喎，寫筆記喎。
I mean, maybe he's, doing his list to go shopping later.
我知佢都買一陣購物嘅清單啫。
No, I know he's taking
我
notes.
知道佢真係喺度寫筆記。
Okay, now I wanted to show you the same thing in a different, little bit of an animation.
咁我想講同樣嘢，但係用另外換一個角度去睇下。
So this will show kind of the relationship between those primary and secondary minds.
咁呢一個會展示到俾我哋睇咧，就係嗰個主要同次要嘅心識。
So this is the a primary visual or seeing mind.
咁呢個係我哋主要就係話嗰個視覺嘅嗰個心識嚟嘅。
So, for example, I'm seeing this gentleman,
舉例就好似我而家望住睇緊呢一個嘅先生，呢位先生啦。
and then the secondary minds come into play. Here they are, boom.
咁呢個次要嘅呢啲嘅心識咧就出嚟啦。
So these are always there, the
呢
five we just
個就
looked
剛剛
at.
我頭先講過嗰5個經常會喺度運作緊嘅。
Intention, attention,
我哋嘅
recognition,
意
feeling,
圖啦，
contact.
我哋嘅感覺啦，我哋嘅接觸啦，我哋仲有
Feeling, contact. Yeah, a recognition
我確認啦，
and intention,
意
attention.
圖同埋注意力嘅。
And then these are the other categories, which we don't really need to go into.
咁呢啲係其他嘅種類，我哋唔需要特別去講啦。
But just I'd like to say that most of them are either, wholesome or unwholesome, virtuous or non-virtuous.
咁好多其實都係講緊就話，究竟係完全啦，抑或唔完全啦，抑或係
Virtuous is like wholesome, good.
真美咪真實，美德嘅。
美德有美德嘅定係冇美德嘅，缺德嘅，有美德或者缺德嘅。
Now, remember that the mind is made up of a mental continuum, like beads on this mullah, the string, okay?
記唔記得我頭先講過，我哋個心識咧就好似呢一個念珠上邊嗰啲嘅珠咁樣嘅。
So this is like one bead of the mind, and it's like the seeing mind for just a moment.
咁呢個就係話喺我哋嗰個視覺嗰個嘅心識裏邊咧，就係話每一個當下咧，其實我哋就好似一粒嗰啲咁嘅珠咁樣樣啦。
So the example is I see this gentleman.
咁個例子就係我見到呢一個嘅先生。
Before I start thinking, it's a visual mind.
當我未開始諗嘅時候咧，其實係我視覺嗰個心識喺度嘅。
And then I hear my translator translate.
咁然後我就聽到我嘅翻譯員幫我喺度翻譯緊。
That's my auditory, my hearing mind.
呢個就係我聽覺嘅嗰個心識啦。
Okay? For you that are more oriented towards the brain and the body, it would be like, not the same, but like the sound coming in and hitting the eardrum vibrating and sending electrical impulses to my brain. Not the same as that, but similar.
咁但係佢就話，可能對於我哋即係比較中意用腦去思考嘅人咧，其實嗰個比喻咧類似嘅，唔係完全一樣啊。類似就係話，當個聲音係進入我哋嘅耳仔，打到我哋嘅耳鼓，然後由個耳鼓嘅震動去到我哋個腦嗰度，話俾我哋個腦嗰度知，而咧有個咁樣嘅訊息入緊嚟啦。咁所以我哋就聽到嘢啦。
How many of you think that the brain and the mind are the same thing?
有邊個覺得我哋嘅心識同我哋嘅腦袋係同一樣嘢嚟嘅？
Brain and mind same.
我哋嘅腦袋同心識係同一樣嘢。
See, no scientists here. How many of you think they're different?
有幾多人覺得呢兩樣嘢係唔同㗎？
Okay, very good. How many are not sure? Still trying to think about it. Not sure.
唔肯定，有幾多人唔肯定？
Okay, very good. We have wonderful. Appreciate your honesty. Great. So then we have the secondary minds with this hearing mind.
好啦，咁跟住就係聽覺呢一個心識嘅次要嘅心識嚟出嚟咯
So this is the second bead. Okay, I can't really isolate two very well. It's the second bead on this mala, on this rosary.
呢個咧就係喺呢一個串珠上邊嘅第2粒嘅珠啦。
Okay, and so the example was I'm hearing my translator translating. I'm hearing the sound of her voice.
咁嗰個當下就係我係聽到我嘅翻譯員幫我翻譯緊嘅。
And then I do what we always do is we start thinking.
咁然後我哋經常會做嘢就開始諗嘢咯
So I start thinking, wow, she's a good translator.
咁我就喺度諗啦，就佢係一個幾好嘅翻譯員喎。
Then I think, how do I know that? I can't understand Chinese.
咁然後我就問自己啦，咁我點知啊？我都唔明中文。
But I know she's a good translator.
咁但係我知道佢係一個好嘅翻譯員
She
喎。
interacts on difficult terms with some of the people.
佢同有啲即係特別嘅字佢唔明啦，佢會同其他人去交流啦。
She's very animated. When I get sort of animated, she's very animated.
我見到我喐嘅時候，我見到佢又跟住我用同樣嘅動作啦。
She's got more energy than me. So yeah, she is a good translator,
所以
even though I don't know Chinese.
係啦，佢應該係一個好嘅翻譯員，雖然我都唔識中文。
So then the secondary minds come in.
咁次要嘅心識就出嚟咯
So this is like the third bead, okay, on the rosary, representing the continuum of mind. Just a bunch of mental moments, coming, one by one.
喎。咁所以喺呢一個念珠上邊咧，呢一個嘅心識咧就變成係第三粒嘅珠啦。咁所以點解我話喺呢個心識嘅層面咧，其實係一個不斷延展、不斷發生緊嘅。
Okay. So I think I'm finished with this.
好啦，咁我用完啦。
Thank you very
係
much.
多謝。
So now let's move to the subtle mental
咁
consciousness.
而家咧，我哋進入呢一個比較微細嘅思想嘅意識裏邊啦。
So the mind is like a parachute.
咁我哋嘅心識咧就好似一個嘅降落傘咁樣。
Do you know how?
知唔知點解啊？
Grabs everything? Kind of,
可能係類似咧，將所有嘢都捉住抓住
kind
嘅。
of. It works best when it's open.
似降落傘係因為降落傘咧，只係運用到最好嘅情況底下就係要打開啦，因為降落傘唔打開冇用嘅。
So you know what a parachute does when it doesn't open, and you're jumping from a plane.
如果你飛機跳落嚟，你降落傘唔打開，你就有問題啦。
And the same with the mind. We don't usually recognize it. When the mind is closed, we don't feel well.
咁所以同樣喎，如果我哋嘅心識咧係唔打開係閂埋嘅時候咧，其實我哋會感覺唔係咁好嘅。
Our actions are very limited,
我哋嘅行動就變得非常之有限制啦。
mostly selfish.
大部分嘅時間都會變得好自私嘅一啲行動。
So this is giving us one other approach to work on our selfishness, is to open our minds.
咁另外一個方法幫我哋去對付我哋呢個所謂自私咧，就係將我哋嘅心識去打開佢。
Now remember, mind includes heart.
記得我哋嘅心識其實係加埋我哋嘅心喺裏邊嘅。
This is very nice. I'm pointing to my actual heart organ, and she's pointing to her heart chakra. I like this. It's very nice.
This is my heart, sir. 佢就話即係佢指嘅時候就指佢即係真係佢身體嘅心臟啦嚇，但係我指咧係指我心輪嘅。咁我呢個慣性我係指呢度。
So opening our mind also means opening our heart.
咁所以打開我哋嘅心識咧，亦都係代表打開我哋嘅心。
And opening our heart means compassion, love.
咁而打開我哋嘅心咧，就係代表愛啦同埋慈悲啦。
Thinking about another person's welfare.
係啦，關心其他人嘅一啲嘅幸福，
May they be happy.
願佢哋可以快樂。
And then, is there anything I can do about it?
咁我有咩可以做到嘅咧？
Not sure, so I don't do anything.
咁如果唔肯定嘅話，咁我唔做任何嘢啦。
Or I say, yeah, I think I know what might be able to help. I know what might be able to help. Then you go ahead and you act.
咁然後如果你覺得話，咦，可能我真係知道有啲嘢可以幫到佢嘅喎，咁於是你就採取行動啦。
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, let's see, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about death,
咁我哋講少少關於死亡，
okay?
好嘛？
Yeah, good. From a Buddhist perspective and also from a New Age perspective, death is not so frightening.
咁對於佛教嚟講，或者對於即係比較現代嘅即係靈修嘅人嚟講咧，都覺得死亡其實唔係咁恐懼嘅。
Sometimes we see it as a transition.
咁其實我哋見呢一個只不過係一個轉移嘅啫，一個轉變嚟嘅。
And, okay, so our life cycle has several major transition points.
咁喺我哋嘅生命呢一個嘅循環裏邊咧，其實有好多嘅唔同嘅轉折點嘅。
When we're born,
當我哋出世啦，
or actually in the Buddhist understanding, it's when we're conceived.
喺佛教裏邊
Before
我
we're
話
born.
係啦，我哋出世之前其實係我哋即係投胎嗰下，即係喺我哋媽媽嘅肚成形嘅嗰下，係咪成形啊？受孕嘅時候，受孕嘅時候。
And so in some Buddhist cultures, like Tibetan, when you're born, you're 1 year old.
咁所以喺一啲佛教嘅思想就話，你出世咧就你已經係1歲㗎啦。
But for us, I don't know, Chinese
Chinese
also.
also, yeah.
Okay,
中
because
國人都係咁諗嘅，落地1歲嚇。
the Chinese have an older Buddhist culture than Tibet.
咁啊，中國人其實有
true.
好古老嘅一啲嘅思想嚇
Yeah, it's
啲
true.
思想係。
It comes from the 5th century in China, and it's the roughly 7th century in Tibet.
咁所以喺中國嘅第5世紀嘅時候，就等於喺西藏嘅第7嘅世紀。
So in Buddhist cultures, there's often this understanding that life begins with conception, not with birth.
咁所以喺佛教裏邊咧，我哋就話受孕嘅嗰下咧，其實就已經係我哋生命嘅開始。
So it's kind of nice if you're Chinese,
咁所以如果你係中國人咧，其實係好嘅。
because traditionally, let's say you're 21,
你中國人如果你21歲嘅話啦嚇，
and you can say, well, I'm really 20.
其實我只不過係20歲。
Or you can say, I'm 20,
又或者你話我係20歲，
but I'm really 21, let me into this bar.
但係其實我真正其實係21歲嘅，所以你俾我入去呢間酒吧度啦。
I don't drink, I'm a monk.
我係一個即係真人，我唔飲酒嘅。
The second major point in the life cycle
喺呢個人生嗰個循環裏邊，第2個階段啊，
is death.
就係死亡。
Notice I'm talking about a life cycle.
我講緊生命嘅一個循環啊。
And the third important point in the life cycle is when we take what's called an intermediate state, a bardo, and then a reborn.
咁第3個階段咧，就係話我哋進入一個中間嘅位啦，中介嘅位啦，咁就係準備中陰期、陰陽、中陰期。
How's the Mandarin working on these terms? Is it clear in Mandarin? Clear? Great. Very good. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. I know we are. I can see your faces. Okay, great. Good. So then the life cycle is continuing to turn.
咁生命嘅循環係不斷喺度轉嘅。
We're born,
我哋出世啦，
we die,
我哋死亡啦，
and then we take rebirth.
我哋又重生啦，
And then we die,
我哋死亡啦，
and we take rebirth.
我哋又重生，
Circle, circle, circle.
不斷
Okay?
咁循環嘅。
And we call that samsara.
我哋叫呢個做 samsara。
That's the Sanskrit term.
呢個係梵文嘅輪迴。OK， samsara 就係輪。
Yeah, it's not quite, it involves reincarnation, but it means the cycling aspect of the life cycle, from birth to death to rebirth.
就係話，即係我哋生存啦、死亡啦，不斷不斷咁樣循環啦，呢一個嘅循環係，
And yes, it involves reincarnation.
亦都包括輪迴啦，裏邊係。
So in this model, rebirth and reincarnation would be the same.
重生同呢個輪迴其實就係一樣啦嚇。
So let's see if this works. So this happens, going through an intermediate state, again being reborn, die. You know, this cycle happens again and again.
咁呢個生存，然後死亡，又再投胎，又再死亡嘅不斷嘅循環咧，係不斷咁樣發生嘅。
Yeah, I don't know. Let's try. Okay, you watching?
咁呢個就循環啦。
Anybody get dizzy?
覺得少少頭暈啊？
Actually, it doesn't happen that fast.
其實唔係咁快嘅。
Usually takes about 80 years. Some people die early. Some people live 100. But that would be too slow. We wouldn't have the time to wait here for that to turn around.
咁呢個太慢啦。
So we did it faster.
咁所以呢個快啲嚇。
Okay, subtle body.
好啦，我哋講呢一個能量體啦。
Now, we've kind of, in one day we can't cover all this stuff in a lot of detail, of course. It's a lot of material.
係啦，我哋一日裏邊咧，其實冇辦法可以包含晒講咁多樣嘢嚇。
but we're covering some of the highlights.
咁我哋只係講一啲嘅重點出嚟啫。
So we've gone through, at least to some degree, compassion.
咁我哋講咗少少關於慈悲啦。
And there are a few slides later that will round out some of the compassion, getting back to your question.
咁亦都會再遲啲，亦都會再提翻慈悲仲有啲唔同嘅質素啦。
We've talked about the mind.
我哋講過心識啦，
Okay. We've talked a little bit about meditation.
我哋講少少關於靜心啦。
So what we have left to do this afternoon are to talk about the subtle body
咁剩翻少少咧，我哋想講咧就係我哋嘅呢一個能量體啦，
and to meditate.
就係跟住我哋會做一啲靜心。
Okay, so what I think we'll do, I'd like to take a break.
咁我想先係有少少
I'd
嘅
like
時
you
間，
to come back, maybe 5-10 minutes if you can.
係啦，5至10分鐘到啦，好
And
唔好？
then what I'll do is I'll have you all settle because many of you will be talking so much excitement. And then I'll have you kind of settle, okay? And we won't be so tired then because we moved around. Then we'll meditate.
咁就係我哋5分鐘、10分鐘後翻嚟咧，咁等我哋就靜低落嚟啦，因為可能大家即係 break 嘅時候會大家傾偈好多，好緊張、好開心啊咁樣。咁然後靜低落嚟咧，今日我哋就可以開始做一個靜心。
And then after that, we'll have some discussion time.
然後我哋就有一個討論嘅時間，俾大家問問題嘅時間。
So please come on back in 5 or 10.
好啦，5至10分鐘後翻嚟，唔該晒。